Apostolic letter Patris Corde with the Father's heart. That is how Joseph loved Jesus, with all four Gospels referred to as the son of Joseph. Matthew and Luke, the two evangelists who speak most of Joseph, tell us very little, yet enough for us to appreciate what sort of father he was and the mission entrusted to him by God's providence. We know that Joseph was a lowly carpenter betrothed to Mary. He was a just man, ever ready to carry out God's will as revealed to him in the law and through dreams. After a long and tiring journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem, he beheld the birth of the Messiah in a stable, and since there was no place for them elsewhere, he witnessed the adoration of the shepherds and the Magi who represented them, respectively, the people of Israel and the pagan people. Joseph had the courage to become the legal father of Jesus, to whom he gave the name revealed by the angel, "You shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." As we know, for ancient people, to give a name to a person or to a thing, as Adam did in the book of Genesis, was to establish a relationship. In the temple, 40 days after Jesus' birth, Joseph and Mary offered their child to the Lord and listened with amazement to Simeon's prophecy concerning Jesus and his mother. To protect Jesus from Herod, Joseph dwelt as a foreigner in Egypt. After returning to his own country, he led a hidden life in the tiny, obscure village of Nazareth in Galilee, far from Bethlehem, his ancestral town, and from Jerusalem and the temple. Of Nazareth it was said, "No prophet is to rise." And indeed, can anything good come out of Nazareth? When during a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, Joseph and Mary lost track of the 12-year-old Jesus, they anxiously sought after him and found him in the temple in discussion doctors of the law. After Mary, the mother of God, no saint is mentioned more frequently in the papal magisterium than Joseph, her spouse. My predecessors reflected on the message contained in the limited information handed down by the Gospels in order to appreciate more fully his central role in the history of salvation. Blessed Pius IX declared him patron of the Catholic Church. Venerable Pius XII proposed him as a patron of workers, and Saint Pope John Paul II as guardian of the Redeemer, and Joseph is universally invoked as a patron of a happy death. Now, 150 years after his proclamation as patron of the Catholic Church by Blessed Pius IX, I would like to share some personal reflection on this extraordinary figure so close to our own human experience. For as Jesus says, "Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth will speak." My desire to do so increased during these months of pandemic, when we experience amid the crisis how our lives are woven together and sustained by ordinary people. People often overlooked, people who do not appear in the newspaper, magazine headlines, or on the latest television show, yet in these very days are surely shaping the decisive events of our history. Doctors, nurses, storekeepers and supermarket workers, cleaning personnel, caregivers, transport workers, men and women working to provide essential services and public safety, volunteers, priests, men and women and religious, and so very many others. They understood that no one is saved alone. How many people daily exercise patience and offer hope, taking care to spread not panic but shared responsibility? How many fathers, mothers and grandmothers and teachers are showing our children in small everyday ways how to accept and deal with crisis, adjusting their routines, looking ahead and encouraging the practice of prayer. How many are praying, making sacrifices, interceding for the good of all? Each of us can discover in Joseph, the man who goes unnoticed, a daily discreet and hidden presence, an intercessor, support, and a guide in times of trouble. Saint Joseph reminds us that those who appear hidden on the shadows can play an incomparable role in the history of salvation. A word of recognition and of gratitude is due to them all. A beloved father. The greatness of Saint Joseph is that he was the spouse of Mary and of the father of Jesus. In this way, he placed himself, words of Saint John Chrysostom, at the service of the entire plan of salvation. Saint Paul VI pointed out that Joseph concretely expressed his fatherhood by making his life a sacrificial service of mastery and the mystery of the Incarnation and its redemptive purpose. He employed his legal authority over the Holy Family to devote himself completely to them in his life and work. He turned his human vocation to domestic love into superhuman oblation of himself, his heart, and of his abilities, a love placed at the service of the Messiah who was growing to maturity in his home. Thanks to his role in salvation history, Saint Joseph always been venerated as a father by the Christian people. This is shown by the countless churches dedicated to him worldwide, the numerous religious institutes, confraternities, and ecclesial groups that inspired by his spirituality and bearing his name, and the many traditional expression piety in his honor. Innumerable men and women have also passionately devoted to him. Many among them are Teresa of Jesus, who chose him as an advocate and intercessor, had frequent recourse to him to receive whatever graces she asked of him. Encouraged by her own experience, Teresa persuaded others to cultivate devotion to Joseph. Every prayer book contains prayer to Saint Joseph. Special prayers are offered to him each Wednesday, and especially during the month of March, which is traditionally dedicated to him. Popular trust in Saint Joseph is seen in the expression "Go to Joseph," which evokes the famine in the Egypt. When the Egyptian begged Pharaoh for bread, he in turn replied, "Go to Joseph, what he says to you, go do." Pharaoh was referring to Joseph, the son of Jacob, who was sold into slavery because of jealousy of his brother, who, according to biblical accounts, subsequently became the viceroy of Egypt. As a descendant of David, from whose stock Jesus was to spring, according to the promise made to David by the prophet Nathan, the spouse of Mary of Nazareth, Saint Joseph stands at the crossroads between the Old and the New Testaments. A tender and loving father, Joseph saw Jesus grow daily in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. As the Lord had done with Israel, so Joseph did with Jesus. He taught him to walk, taking him by the hand. He was for him like a father who raises an infant to his cheeks, bending down to him and feeding him. In Joseph, Jesus saw the tender love of God. As a father has compassion for his children, so the Lord has compassion for those who fear him. In the synagogue, during the praying of the Psalms, Joseph would surely have heard again and again, the God of Israel is a God of tender love, who is good to all and whose compassion is over all that he has made. The history of salvation is worked out in hope and against hope through our weaknesses. All too often we think that God works only through our better parts, yet most of his plans are realized in and despite our frailty. Thus St. Paul could say that to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of the Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. Three times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Since this is part of the entire economy of salvation, we learn to look upon our weaknesses with tender mercy. The evil one makes us to see and condemn our frailty, whereas Spirit brings us light with tender love. Tenderness is the best way to touch frailty within us. Pointing finger, judging are frequently signs of inability to accept our own weaknesses over our frailty. Only tender love will save us from the snares of the accuser. That is why it is so important to encounter God's mercy, especially in the sacrament of reconciliation, where we experience his truth and his tenderness. Paradoxically, the evil one can also speak the truth to us, yet he does so only to condemn us. We know that God's truth does not condemn, but instead welcomes, embraces, sustains, and forgives us. That truth always presents itself to us like the merciful Father in Jesus' parable. It comes out to meet us, restore our dignity, sets us back on our feet, and rejoices for us. For as the Father says, this is my son was dead and is alive again, he was lost and is found. Even through Joseph's fears, God's will, his history, and his plan were at work. Joseph then teaches us that faith in God includes believing that He can work even through our fears, our frailties, and our weaknesses. He also teaches us that amid the tempests of life, we must never be afraid to let the Lord steer our course. At times, we want to be completely controlled, yet God always sees the bigger picture. An obedient father. As he had done with Mary, God revealed his saving plan to Joseph. He did so by using dreams, which in the Bible and among ancient people were considered a way for him to make his will known. Joseph was deeply troubled by Mary's mysterious pregnancy. He did not want to expose her to public disgrace, so he decided to dismiss her quietly. In the first dream, an angel helps him to resolve his grave dilemma. Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you will give him the name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Joseph's response was immediate. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. Obedience made it possible for him to surmount his difficulties and spare Mary. In the second dream, the angel tells Joseph, get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. So Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. Joseph did not hesitate to obey regardless of the hardship involved. He got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. In Egypt, Joseph awaited with patient trust. The angel noted that he would safely return home. In a third dream, the angel told him that those who sought to kill the child were dead and ordered him to rise and take the child and his mother return to the land of Israel. Once again, Joseph promptly obeyed. He got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. During the return journey, when Joseph heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there after being warned in a dream. Now, for the fourth time, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth. The evangelist Luke, for his part, tells us that Joseph undertook the long and difficult journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem to be registered family town of origin, census of the Emperor Caesar Augustus. There Jesus was born, and his birth, like that of every other child, was recorded in the registry of the empire. Saint Luke is specially concerned to tell us that Jesus observed all the prescriptions of the law, the rites of the circumcision, the purification of Mary after childbirth, and the offering of the firstborn to God. In every situation, Joseph declared his own fiat like that of Mary, the Annunciation, and Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In his role as the head of the family, Joseph taught Jesus to be obedient to his parents in accordance with God's command. During the hidden years in Nazareth, Jesus learned at the school of Joseph to do the will of the Father, that was to be his daily food. Even at the most difficult moments of his life in Gethsemane, Jesus chose to do the Father's will rather than his own, according to the obedient unto death, even death on a cross. The author of the letter to Hebrews just concludes Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. All this makes clear that Saint Joseph was called by God to serve the person and mission of Jesus directly to exercise the fatherhood, and that way he cooperated in fullness of time the great mystery of salvation and is truly the minister of salvation. An accepting father. Joseph accepted Mary unconditionally, trusted in the angels. With the nobility of Joseph's heart is such that he learned from the law he made dependent on charity. Today, in our world where psychological, verbal, and physical violence towards women is evident, Joseph appears as a figure of respectful and a sensitive man. Even though he did not understand the entire picture, he makes a decision to protect Mary's good name, her dignity, and her life. In his hesitation about how best to act, God helped him by enlightening his judgment. Often in life, things happen whose meaning we do not understand. Our first reaction is frequently one of disappointment and rebellion. Joseph set aside his own ideas in order to accept the course of events, and mysterious as they seem, to embrace them, take responsibility for them, and make them part of his own history. Unless we are reconciled with our own history, we are unable to take a single step forward, for we will always remain hostage to our expectations and disappointments that follow. The spiritual path that Joseph traces for us is one that explains not but accepts. Only as a result of this acceptance, his reconciliation, can we begin to glimpse a broader history, deeper meaning. We can almost hear and echo the impassioned reply of Job to his wife, who had urged him to rebel against the evil he endured. Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad? Joseph is certainly not passively resigned but courageously and firmly proactive in our own lives. Acceptance and welcome can be an expression of the Holy Spirit gift of fortitude. Only the Lord can give us the strength needed to accept life as it is, with all its contradictions, frustrations, and disappointments. Jesus' appearance in our midst is a gift from the Father, which makes it possible for each of us to be reconciled to the flesh of our own history, even when we fail to understand it completely. Just as God told Joseph, the son of David, do not be afraid, so it seems to tell us, do not be afraid. We need to set aside all anger and disappointment to embrace the way things are, even when they do not turn out as we wish. Not with mere resignation, but with hope and courage. In this way, we are open to a deeper meaning. Our lives can be miraculously reborn if we find the courage to live them in accordance with the gospel. It does not matter if everything seems to have gone wrong or some things may no longer be fixed. God can make flowers spring up from stony ground, even if our heart condemns us. The Lord is greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. Here once again we encounter that Christian realism which rejects nothing that exists. Reality in its mysterious and irreducible complexity is the bearer of existential meaning with all its lights, shadows. Thus the Apostle Paul can say, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, to which St. Augustine adds, even that which is called evil. It is the greatest perspective. Faith gives meaning to every event, however happy or sad.